Hi everyone, so today we're going to be solving linear equations that have distribution, and they're going to be pretty simple, so we're going to leave it at level 1 today. So whenever we're solving equations that contain distribution, and you know that we're going to be distributing if there is a number directly outside a set of parentheses, we're always going to do the distribution first. And then we solve using inverse operations as if we would solve a regular two-step or one-step equation. So we're always going to do that distribution. And remember, distribution is just multiplying to whatever's inside the parentheses. So let's look at an example here. We have 5 times y plus 3 equals 30. So what we're going to do is I always like to circle the number right outside the parentheses, and that's the number that we're going to be distributing. So we're going to multiply that to y, and we're going to multiply that to a positive 3. So 5 times y is just 5y. You write them right next to each other. And then 5 times 3 gives us a positive 15. Now, we don't distribute to that 30 because it's not inside the parentheses. You only distribute to what's inside the parentheses. Oh, and I forgot to write my train tracks because I always like to start off like that. And now we just have a regular two-step equation that we have to solve by using inverse operations. So we're going to move the constant first. We're going to subtract 15 on both sides. Those cancel out. I'm going to bring down this 5y, and I'm going to bring down the equal sign. Now 30 minus 15 gives us 15. And the last step here is to divide by 5 on both sides to get that y by itself. So we're going to get y equals, and 15 divided by 5 gives us 3. Now you could substitute it back in to check it. I'm not going to do that this time. But you really can see if we plug in 3 here, we would have to do what's inside the parentheses first. So 3 plus 3 would give us 6. And then 5 times 6 gives us 30. So we know that that's right. So do the distribution first, then solve using inverse operations. Let's take a look at another example. So here we have negative 2 times the difference of 2z and 4, and that equals 4. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw my train tracks. Now I'm going to circle what's outside the parentheses. Remember, whenever we see that number right outside parentheses, we know we're going to distribute, and we're going to multiply that to both the terms inside. Now, be careful here. This is a negative 2, so we're going to be multiplying by a negative 2. So negative 2 times 2z is going to give us negative 4z, because negative 2 times 4 is negative 4. Then we have negative 2 times negative 4. A negative times negative is a positive, so we're going to put a plus there. And then 2 times 4 is 8. Remember, we're not distributing to the 4 on the other side. It's not in the parentheses, so we're going to just bring that down. Now from there, solving regular two-step equations, we're going to move the constant first, so we're going to subtract that 8 on both sides. Why it keeps doing that? Okay, subtract the 8, that cancels. I'm going to bring down this negative 4z. I'm going to just extend my train tracks a little. Now 4 minus negative 8 is going to give us negative 4. And then we're going to our last step. We want to get that z by itself. We're going to divide by negative 4. This cancels. Bring down your z. And then negative 4 divided by negative 4, it would cancel over here too, which just gives us 1. So remember, we have to get our variable by itself, and we have to make sure it's positive. So that's why we have to divide by a negative 4, not just a positive 4. Because if we divided by a positive 4, we would have negative z, which we don't want. We want positive z. So we distributed first, then we solved just using inverse operations. Let's take a look at one more example. Here we have the negative of x plus 10 equals negative 14. So here we don't have a number, right? Or we don't see one at least. And remember, if we don't see a number, usually the number is 1. So we have an invisible 1 right there. So this negative is really -1. Just like when we were subtracting polynomials, we distributed that -1. We're going to do the same thing here. So before I distribute that, I'm going to draw my train tracks. And we're going to distribute this invisible -1 here. So -1 times x gives us -1x. So if you want, you can write the 1 in. I'll write that in for right now. And then -1 times 10 gives us -10. So we're going to write -10. Now we're going to bring down anything we didn't touch. So we're going to bring down that 14. Now here we're going to just solve using inverse operations just like we would from before. You're going to add your 10 to both sides. This cancels out. And 14 plus, that's a -14. That's my fault. So let me make sure I include that negative. See, that's why it's important to always check your work. Okay, so -14 plus 10 is going to give us -4. And I'm going to bring down this -1x equals. Okay, so our 10's canceled out here, and then -14 plus 10, they're different signs, so you subtract to keep the sign of the larger, you get -4. Now, just like we were talking about before, we're not done yet because this needs to be positive. We need a positive x in the end. So what we're going to do here is we are going to just divide by this -1. So our x comes down. So we get x equals, and then -4 divided by -1, a negative divided by negative gives us a +4. And that's it. So we distribute whatever is directly outside the parentheses. So we have to make sure that we're multiplying correctly. So you have to remember those rules for multiplying positive and negative numbers. And then you just solve the rest of the equation using inverse operations.